Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tend Her Class 3 on Resilience. Tonight, we're talking about emotional and mental resilience. So last class, class number 2, we worked with physical resilience. Tonight, it's all about mental emotional. So I want to start out by talking about why first this is pre-recorded. So although some of you do most of the recordings because you can't be there on Monday nights, there's usually about 300 of us that are gathered together. And it's very interesting. And I realize I'm quite sensitive to energy, but I can really feel the beauty and the space of all of us gathering together. So that would be the ideal, is if I was able to have done this class live. But just about 3 weeks ago, I had an opportunity come my way to go study with a teacher that I've wanted to learn from for a very long time. And prior to that, about a month ago, I had told my assistant I really would like to find some kind of retreat, training, a place for me to receive and take in information instead of be extending it out. It's been a big year of teaching for me. And when I saw this experience come across, it's a very small sort of training retreat for about 20 women. Right away, I saw the dates were right in the middle of Tend Her, and I thought, well, there's no way I can do this. The good girl in me, the responsible, like, I can't do that. I can't be away. And even though I had asked, I had set out my intention. I really need a retreat of something for me to receive and learn. So when this came across my desk or my email, I brought it up with my assistant Kimberly, and she's like, "You have to go. We got this. You got this covered. And plus, you teach online. You don't have to be in person." So at the time that you receive this video, I'm hopefully, knock on wood, safely in Spain, where I'm going to do this training. Just gone for a little less than a week, but I'll be back with you for class 4. So let's dive into mental and emotional resilience. Again, if our body is resilient and we add in the layer of the mind and our emotions, we get all the more strong. So let's dive in and figure out how do we do this? And of course, there will be practices as well to accompany all of this tonight. And before I get into the new content, I want to do just a little bit of review because I think it's helpful for all of us to keep coming back around to what we've sort of been already traversing. And the first thing I want you to keep contemplating, working with, seeking to understand more about is a resilient story in your own life. I shared one of mine in class number 2. I really truly believe we have multiple resilient stories throughout the course of a lifetime because we have multiple challenges, hard things, griefs, traumas, things that happen to us that give us this learning ground in many ways to grow and to evolve. So there's sort of a process here to begin to think through. And I want to reiterate that it's best to work on understanding your resilience based on something you've already on some level healed. You maybe haven't healed all of it, but it's more of a scar now than an open gaping wound. Because I feel like when we're still in a really wounded place, it's so hard to get to that fifth part of this, which is what's the growth? What's the lesson? When we're in such deep pain, it's almost impossible to get clarity. It's like more time needs to pass, more healing needs to pass before we can really understand the lesson and the potential growth that comes out, how we become more resilient because of what we've gone through. So I'm just going to encourage you to keep working on this. And if any of you would like to share them, I would be honored to read and to hear from you. We're also looking for volunteers if you're coming to our Resilient Summit to potentially share your story in a larger venue. I know that can feel very vulnerable for many of us, but if something is calling to you, please reach out. It's info@heartlandyoga.com or betsy@heartlandyoga.com. All right, so here's our review slide. How, at least in this process, this course, I believe that, as I've said before, many paths up the mountain, but how do we get to more resilience? And I really believe, after all of my study, that these three components are really important. We have to know ourselves. We have to know not only the surface of our lives, but we have to be willing to dig a little deeper. We have to go in deeper to ourselves to really understand who we are, what's happened to us, how we've been shaped, what stories we're living under, what challenges have really impacted us. We have to know thyself to be able to tap into that strong, deep, resilient core. We also have to feel ourselves. And tonight, that's really what we're going to explore, is this concept of feeling ourselves, feeling our emotions, feeling our mind, feeling what's happening around us and in us. And then last but not least, there is this next step. Once we understand more of who we are, or feeling more of ourselves, there is something so transformative, healing about being vulnerable and sharing yourself. This doesn't mean you have to share yourself with everyone in this course. It may mean that you share aspects of your story or share aspects of who you are with a close beloved or a friend, or maybe these resilient circles that many people are signing up, yay, to be a part of. It's a chance for you to be seen. Something magnetic happens, something energetic happens when someone witnesses us. Now, it doesn't mean that that person witnessing us has to solve our challenge, has to heal us, has to make anything different, but just simply the witnessing of who we are, man, it can be a life changer. So where I want to start this conversation of emotional and mental resilience tonight is for all of us to take, again, there's the know thyself, take stock of, am I a little numbed out or a lot numbed out? So here's some, maybe some signs that you are a little emotionally shut down or numbed out. As we talked about last time, you might be living outside of the body, above the body, to the side of the body. But some ways to know that we might be a little numbed out. And why do we numb out? Stress, trauma, tension, overwhelm. Well, we know we're numbed out if our emotions are in a much more narrow range. So we're not feeling a lot of joy. We're not feeling maybe a lot of pain or sorrow. We're just not feeling much of all at all. Now, caveat here, and I need to speak to this, is that if you are on an antidepressant medication, your range of emotions is more narrow. The medication creates that so that you aren't feeling the deep depression, maybe the deep overwhelm, but it also means that it cuts off some of the high highs. So this is not at all any suggestion that you go off your medication, that you drop your medication, or that taking medication is wrong. I believe medication can be a really great tool in many cases. So please, don't change anything, but know that that might be one of the reasons that people who are on antidepressants sometimes will say to me, I literally can't cry and I want to cry. Like I want to cry happy tears, or there's a sad movie and I feel like I should be crying and I'm not. And so just knowing that if you're on a medication, that is going to change your range. But some of us, or some of you that might not be on medication, may still feel like your range is a little more limited. Another sign we might be numbed out is that it's been years since you cried. Tears are actually really normal. There are many different types of tears. There's some beautiful research on that. Tears of anger, tears of frustration, tears of joy. But it's healthy. It's actually really healthy. And we're going to talk in a moment from a sort of more chemical reason why crying is so useful. Not only have you not cried, but maybe you haven't laughed very much. Like I want you to kind of listen in towards yourself. When was the last time you laughed so hard your belly hurt? There was like a stitch in your side. You were laughing so hard. Can you even remember a time when that happened? Now, if we are regularly drinking or using drugs, we're numbed out. This is a hard one because it's so culturally sanctioned to have some alcohol every night. And again, I'm not saying or suggesting that you need to change anything. I'm not making any judgment calls on whether you use alcohol every night or not. I'm just wanting you to begin to think about, am I actually feeling my feelings? Am I really alive and engaged in my life, or am I a little shut down? And again, there might be a lot of good reasons why being shut down right now is useful, important, helpful. But if we're using alcohol on a regular basis, it is sort of energetically, emotionally shutting us down. We're not feeling in the same depths. It's said in some literature, and some theorists talk about that addiction is often comes out of an unwillingness to feel. So the emotions are so intense, so hard, too much, that a person gets addicted to using alcohol or drugs as a way not to feel so much. So again, this is honest inquiry with yourself. Do you feel detached from life? Do you look at other people or even people on the movies, the screen, and say, how come I'm not feeling quite as much as they are? And last but not least, this ties directly into what we did last week, which is, do you have a hard time staying in your body? And the reason body resilience is so tied in with emotional and mental resilience is that we feel our emotions in our body. So this might be some potentially new information, perhaps. We experience emotion through the body. Sometimes we believe emotion is coming from our mind. It's actually experienced in the body. Sometimes I've seen it said that emotion, energy, emotion is energy in motion. So emotions are energy that literally wash through our body. So I want you to think about this. In fact, let's just close our eyes for a moment. And before I take you on a little journey, I want you just to settle, feel your feet, feel your pelvis. See if you can land a little more awareness in your physical body. And just using the power of imagination, I'd like you to remember a time when you were super angry and livid. It might be an argument. It might be something going on in the world. It might be deep frustration with something your kid did, something your boss did. But just for a moment, can you recreate, remember that, and then watch what's happening in your body? Can you notice and feel what's happening in your body? Okay, now let that image go. Let that image go. See if you can drop back into neutrality by just feeling weight in the pelvis, feeling the feet on the earth. All right, now I'd like to see if you can imagine, remember, bring back to mind an experience or a memory you have of something that is so joyful. It might be a wedding day. It might be a birthday party. It might be a vacation moment. It might be the birth of your child. But bring to mind a memory where you felt such ecstatic joy. You felt so grateful and so happy to be right there in that moment in time. See if you can bring back little snapshots in your mind, and then notice, where am I feeling this in my body? What's happening in my body as I recreate this memory of joy? And then just drop back into your pelvis, drop back into your feet. Maybe wiggle your hands, shake your torso a little side to side, and then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So I'm curious, and if I was online with you, I'd want you to write in the chat box right now. Where did you feel anger? What did you notice as you brought back to mind a feeling of anger? And you might even take notes in your journal about this. So even though I was leading you through it, there was a part of my mind that was going back on something that I'm still a little bit peeved about. And for me, what I felt is I felt a lot of heat. I just felt heat in my chest and my heart. And I literally felt it moving up towards my neck and my throat, almost like a tightness constriction, but it was definitely heat. And I definitely saw the color red, which seems a little apropos, but it's true. It's kind of what was coming through my mind. So I'm going to give you a moment just to write and observe, like, how do I experience anger in my body? What does that feel like? And then joy. What about joy? What about joy? I had lots of snippets coming through my mind. I wasn't actually settling on one thing, which was interesting. I was having all kinds of little almost snapshots. But for me, joy feels like an uplift. Like I literally almost feel like I'm lighter. It almost felt like little champagne bubbles. I can actually still sort of feel it, like champagne bubbles around me. And I'm still feeling it, like vibration, warmth, tingling in my upper body and my heart, just sort of like actually sort of feels like it's all around me. So I'm curious for you just to jot down some things about what joy feels like to you. So my experience in my body may be quite different than your experience. And I also want to really help people understand that if there's no sensation, if you're like, I ain't feeling anything, Betsy, I don't know what you're talking about, that's okay too. As especially if you realized from our last lecture that you have been pretty distanced from your body. Sometimes we are not in the body to really know what energy or emotion is even flowing through us. So please, please, please be patient with yourself. We're all in different stages in this journey. And, even one step forward, this is all, I always say this is process. There's no end point for any of us in terms of our healing and our awareness. Like there's always more to learn, to grow into, which is why I'm going to fill my cup, because there's so much more for me to learn about myself and about the world and how we all move through it. So I don't know where you felt emotion or if you felt emotion in your body, but I do want to share this beautiful, powerful study that was done. This comes out of Finland. And there was a pretty large number of people in this study, 700 people. Researchers had 700 people watch movies and images to kind of find out where people were feeling the emotion that the image or the movie created them, where they were feeling it in their body. And then these researchers sort of created these maps of where certain emotions are felt in the body. And the blue represents like cold, right? There's a lack of feeling or sensation in the body. Whereas more the red, the gold is there's a lot of sensation in those parts of the body. So I asked about, let's see, I asked about anger. And so you can see it's actually on this image, the top left. So anger often, based on these 700 people, the average is most people feel anger in their upper torso. So chest, heart, I definitely felt it in my throat. And a lot of people will experience down the arms, because when we have anger, what do we often do? There's some kind of thing we want to do. We want to approach it. We want to fight it. We want to get rid of it, right? So a lot of energy in this upper body. Interesting, right? The other one I asked about was sort of happiness, joy. And that one's 4 over. So you see there's sensation all throughout the body, a lot of sensation in the heart and the head. but there's really a lot of sensation all throughout the body, almost like we experience happiness as a full body experience. Now, I didn't ask about sadness when I took you through this, but just look at sadness. Sadness is sensation in the heart, which often we do feel sadness, grief. It sort of lands, it's like often heaviness in the heart. But you can see there's a real numbness in the arms and in the legs, right? Sadness is very much a pulling in. And if you look on the bottom line, depression, it's almost like a lack of sensation altogether, right? It's very much a numbness that happens. So really interesting study that I think so beautifully pinpoints how emotions live in our body, which is why last week's lecture on the physical body and the resilience, this idea of embodiment is so tied in with what we're talking tonight about emotional and mental resilience. So I asked you, are you numbed out? Are you feeling much? If you do feel things, do you notice where you're feeling it in the body? Now, the next thing I want to talk about emotions is that they are data. In fact, I sort of believe emotions are some of the most useful information we can get about what's going on in our lives. Emotions will tell us if the situation we are in is for us, if it's not for us. So emotions are just a constant stream to us of data about what is going on and what is in our highest interest. Now, sometimes we feel overwhelmed by emotions. So this is what I mean is emotions are just data. It's actually quite neutral data. It's just trying to give us information. They're not directives, meaning that we don't have to always act on our emotions. In fact, the other thing I want you to know is emotions are really relatively short-lived. Let me go here. The average emotion only lasts 90 seconds. This might blow your mind. So if you can just be with an emotion, if you really stay with the energy of the emotion, it only lasts 90 seconds in the body. So when you say, I can't handle this, you actually can because it's 90 seconds. And this is a little side note here. The average length of a contraction when you are in labor is about 90 seconds. So it's sort of like our wise bodies know we can put up with anything for about 90 seconds. So similar with emotions, if it's a really hard thing, it's really going to move through quickly. Now, this doesn't mean that when your dog dies or you go through a breakup that you're only going to have 90 seconds of pain and then it's over. Emotions, clearly they come back, but the intensity of the emotion, it's like a wave. It doesn't stay at a high decibel indefinitely. And people that go through grief definitely know this. It's like, I'm doing fine, I'm going through my day, and suddenly, boom, grief just hits me. It's just there. It's like a black cloud over me. And then the cloud eventually floats away. It doesn't mean there's not going to be another black cloud that comes. But I think it's good for us to know that this sort of minute and a half intense, maybe sometimes feels like hell. It's not going to last forever. So it's really important to know that about emotions. And then this is the other one I want to just share. I love this movie, In and Out. Has anyone seen this? I'm sure you have, or if you have children. I feel like I've seen every Disney movie in the last 18 years because of, I think this is Pixar, actually, not Disney. So the creators of this movie did a really good job because they understood the research on emotion. And there's a little bit of discrepancy in the research. Some researchers believe there's sort of 4 classes of emotions. Other people believe there's 5. And then there's many variations under each of these. But of course, going left to right, I can't remember all their names, but we have anger, the red guy. Then we have fear. Then we have joy or happiness. Then we have disgust. This is sometimes the one that's not included in the 4 classes, but this is the 5 classes of emotion. And then of course we have fear, or excuse me, we have sadness. We have sadness. She looks a little scared too, I guess. So we all are wired to feel all of these things. And that's, I guess, my main point here is that so many of us because of how we were raised, because of being a woman in this culture, because of all the different things that shape us, whether it's religion, whether it's neighbors, whether it's grandparents. So many of us have been trained over the years to look at our emotions as inconvenient or inappropriate, or I don't have time to feel this right now, or someone might not like me if I feel this or show this right now. And so we learn to stuff things down. We learn to put it aside instead of let that 90-second energy essentially roll through our bodies. And we all do this. So don't think that I'm like someone who just lets every emotion roll through all the time. No, it's really inconvenient to start crying in the middle of Target, right? So there are times that we don't fully allow that emotion to roll through our system. Now, every emotion that you feel, this is the science behind it, which I find absolutely fascinating. Every emotion you feel releases a neuropeptide. So you feel anger, there's a specific chemical that released. You feel fear, there's another separate chemical that gets released. So there's all these neuropeptides, they're called. Now, neuropeptides want to metabolize in your system, meaning the idea is that you feel the emotion, the 90-second release of this sort of neuropeptide, and it comes through your system, and then it's released. It's metabolized. It's peed out. It's sweated out. It's cried out. It's perspired out, right? These neuropeptides want to metabolize. They want to release, right? Again, it's a particular cycle when we have an emotion. But the neuropeptide can only be metabolized when it's felt, right? So if you have an unresolved emotion or you don't give yourself the space and time to feel the emotion, your body will store that neuropeptide for you. It'll just stuff it down. Typically, it gets stored in the organs that are associated with the hurt or the grief or whatever else you're not feeling. This is the work of Gregg Braden, by the way. Our neuropeptides might be stored for 10 minutes or 60 years. I don't know, right? Until we get the tools or the space or the place where we can actually release things. But we want all of our emotions to move through our system. By the way, when that neuropeptide does release, this is why sometimes if you have like a big emotional release, sometimes you get like a metallic taste in your mouth. Those are those neuropeptides. Another example of this is that, and I definitely have noticed this, is if you have a big emotional release or a big cry or, big anger outburst, sometimes when you pee afterwards, your urine will smell different. Again, that's that neuropeptide that has been released and metabolized. And again, we want everything to flow through. We want everything to flow through. All right. Let's go into one other piece about emotional resilience before we move to mental resilience. And of course, they're all tied together. Like it's really hard to separate these things, but for the sake of teaching, sometimes that helps. Okay, this is the last piece of emotion that the emotion section that I want to bring your attention to. And this research book, Understanding, has been so impactful to me. It's so much a part of how I conceptualize emotion that I had to share it. So there's a book written called Power versus Force by this Dr. David Hawkins. And his field of study, the book is a little bit dense, but this is the piece that I always draw from this book, is that Dr. Hawkins found a way to sort of energetically measure emotion. So just like that Finland research team mapped emotion in the body, Dr. Hawkins figured out sort of the resonance or the energy, I think it's measured maybe in hertz. Yeah, in hertz. He figured that out based on different emotions. And so essentially what he did on the left side is he created a hierarchy from sort of the lowest emotion sort of the lowest vibration emotion to the highest vibration emotion. So you can see highest emotion, enlightenment, peace, love. Those are way up at the top. The lowest vibe, so when you see those hats that say high vibes, like, are you up there in the purple blue section, right? Well, low vibes are going to be the shame, the guilt, the apathy, the grief, right? So way down there. So now, one other nuance to this is that none of these emotions are necessarily bad, but clearly if we are living daily in guilt and shame and apathy, our vibration is really low. And when our energetic vibration is low, we are tired, we are exhausted, we're negative. It's really hard to see any good in life. And that if we move up the scale, and again, one of the nuanced things is that he's like, you can't jump from shame to enlightenment, right? It's too far of a jump energetically. So you sort of have to move your way up the scale. So let's take fear, which is at about 100 hertz here, 100, the measurement. And if you are living in fear, if you get to actually a place of anger, which is up the scale, that's enhancing or improving your vibe. So when I first learned about this, which was, I don't know, a good decade, maybe more ago, it was really interesting. I thought that anger would be at the very bottom, like that anger would be the lowest resonance, like the lowest vibe. But interestingly enough, it's sort of in the middle. So it's taken me a long time to accept that anger gets a really bad rap. And that, yes, anger used in the wrong way can be extremely damaging. But anger honed in a useful way can often foster growth, can often foster courage, can actually create action, beneficial action. So again, this is probably a side note that I'm not going to get into in this time and place, but I think for women, anger has been so conditioned out of us. There's so, I know for me growing up, anger, I didn't see women get angry, right? So when I had feelings of anger, which of course I did, because it's the 5 emotions we're all wired to feel. One of them is anger. There was a lot of self-flagellation and judgment of myself when I felt anger. And still, in fact, I remember when I first got married, it was in my first year of marriage. We had gotten dishes as part of our wedding presents. And I remember I was so mad at my new husband that I literally threw one of the plates. I can see the kitchen we were in, and I threw this plate. And it was so shocking to my spouse, but shocking to me. I'm like, what has come over me? What am I doing? And I remember I just beat myself up for weeks. Not only that I'd broken this new plate that someone had gifted us for our wedding, but how could I have been angry? Well, anger now, I wish I could go back to that, young woman and be like, it's okay. This emotion is here to tell you something. There's something not right. There's something that is frustrating you that you need to know and see. So I would have a lot more compassion for her now, but I remember I was just so hard on myself for being angry. So the point is, all of these emotions will be felt. And we can lift our resonance up by living more. Look at even neutrality. Neutrality is way up there. Just even choosing to be more in a neutral state is going to amp up your vibe. Last thing I want to say about this is the very bottom rung of this ladder, which is shame. We need to talk just a moment about shame. And those of you who want to know more, of course, Brené Brown is written so much about shame, and she's given, I think, our whole culture a new idea about shame. Shame is much different than guilt. Guilt is, I've done something wrong and I feel really bad about it. And so it's very educational. I feel guilty about doing that, so maybe I'm not going to do it again. so that I don't feel guilt again, because these are really low vibe emotions to experience. Shame is different than guilt in that I did something wrong and I am bad. So it's a very self-appraisal emotion. It's not just I did something bad, I'm going to learn from it. It's I did something bad and I'm a horrible person. I am, it becomes very personalized. And we know shame is correlated with all kinds of horrible mental health outcomes, addiction, depression. It's not, of all these emotions, it's the least useful emotion. So if you are aware that you spend a lot of time in shame, and shame often is born out of early traumas that we have. Again, I would really draw you to some of Brene Brown's books on and how do we work with shame? We work with finding our own sense of worthiness, right? Really being in a space of being able to tap into the inherent worthiness that we all have just by being born. Carl Jung, again, one of my favorite teachers, a great psychiatrist from the early 1900s, said shame is a soul-eating emotion. And again, I've been in shame. I've been in deep shame. And it's not someplace that is useful to stay. Again, it's the least useful of all the emotions. All right. That was emotional resilience. We're going to move into mental resilience. Ooh, I want to end with this. Let's end our emotional resilience with this beautiful quote by another one of my favorite teachers, Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She writes, "There are oceans of tears that women have never cried, for they have been trained to carry mothers' and fathers' secrets, men's secrets, society's secrets, and their own secrets to the grave. A woman's crying has been considered quite dangerous, for it loosens the locks and bolts on the secrets she bears. But in truth, for the sake of a woman's wild soul, it is better to cry." I just want to give that quote a moment. I'm going to give that quote a moment because it's so powerful. And I so relate to it. I know I'm in the company of over 1,000 women in this course. And so we women do carry a lot. I always think of women as sort of the hub of the home, the hub of the workplace. We are the emotional supporters of so many people around us. And we often are the listeners. We are the ones who take in the experience and the emotions and the pain of other people, whether it's our children or our friends or our parents or, our partners. And so because we, as women, are more porous, we do take in things more. It's so important for us to move energy of emotion through the body. It's so useful for us to cry. It's so useful for us to emote, to allow our beautiful emotions to be seen by someone else, even if it's just a trusted walking mate every single morning. The tears, the release of that is what empowers and strengthens us, and I believe makes us way more resilient. There's a period I think I shared in maybe the first class in my 20s where I just couldn't cry. I was so shut down. I was so trying to hold it all together. And I was so brittle, right? My capacity now to cry, and my kids often roll their eyes. "Mom, are you crying at that song?" Right? "Why is that movie making you cry?" Like, "Mom, but I feel like it's so healthy for my children to see me emote, because hopefully what I'm doing is normalizing it. And who I really hope knows it's okay to cry is my boys, which I think culture and society has taught them it's not. And unfortunately, I don't know if and when or how that could change to normalize crying and emotion for everyone. But yeah, I'm hopeful that when we allow ourselves to be seen in our emotions, we give other people permission to feel theirs as well. All right. That was emotional resilience. And now we're moving into the mental resilience. So the mind, neck up, here we go. The first thing I want to say about the mind is that I love the mind. I spent the almost entire decade of my 20s in graduate school learning about the mind. In fact, when I was an undergraduate in Minnesota, I remember buying one of those skulls. It was at Pier 1, I remember this, it was like a phrenology where like different parts of the brain represent different other parts. In fact, this is not the one that I originally bought, but I have one, right? I have a small version that I bought later. This was not the original, the OG, but this is sort of, I remember in college buying one of these because I was so fascinated by it. And then in graduate school, I took a neuroanatomy class and I actually got to hold a real brain because we were dissecting brains and I got to actually see a real brain. And I remember just my deep fascination. So I'm saying all this at the beginning because I have to tell you all the reality of our mind. And it's actually not that pretty. But I'm speaking first to let you know I honor the brain. I've had a love affair with the mind. I spend a lot of time exploring my own mind. So the mind is freaking amazing, right? I don't want to release my mind. But because I understand the reality of the mind now, and I didn't for decades, even into my 40s. This is the last decade that I've come to understand the reality of the mind. And much of that understanding has not only come through my study and my reading, but through meditation. So I've been a regular meditator, a daily meditator for, I think I'm pushing about 8 years now. And so that daily meditation has really helped me understand the contours, the patterns of my own mind. And so now I still respect my mind. I still appreciate and love my mind, but I know its limits. And I know it makes a bunch of shit up. And I know I can't always trust it. So now I trust my body and my heart far more than I trust big brain up here that thinks it's all smart and educated. And so I want to share this with you because it's been a game changer for me. And there may be seeds of this that get planted for you that can shift you as well. So let's dive into the nitty gritty of our mind and what we can trust and what we can't trust. So if you look at the mind, oh, there's the picture. There's my human mind statue. If we look at that, we process and experience the world, not only through our mind, but through our body, through our energy, through our heart. The mind is the most tightly constricted aspect of who we are. And this comes more out of what I would say, yoga and meditation philosophy that I've been trained in than necessarily the neuroscience and psychology side of things. But it makes a lot of sense to me just based on my own inner experience of my own mind. It is far more constricted and tight than other aspects of my being, such as my body, my heart, my soul. Now, the mind is definitely never satisfied. So even if we give the mind what it's asking for, it wants something more. It wants something more. It's like a small child. Mom, 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 mom. I want more. I want more. So just know that even if you satisfy the mind with what it's asking for, it's going to always want something more. So we just sort of have to understand we can't really ever satisfy the mind. The mind is also always busy. It is like the Energizer Bunny constantly working. Now, the average person, this is just the average person, has 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. I mean, just take that in, 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. That's like a new thought every 0.4 seconds. It's a lot of busyness going on up there. Now, if you also are stressed right now, you without a doubt are having more thoughts. So what stress does is it amps up anxiety and stress, create more thought in our minds. So it's always going. Even when we sleep, there is still, if you're taking scans of the brain, one exception is deep sleep. The mind really starts to slow down. But if you're in REM sleep, dream sleep, your mind is going. It's still processing. It's still working through things. So constantly moving. Our mind is also negative, right? It doesn't matter how many positive affirmations you say every morning before you go to work. The mind is wired to be negative, and it's wired to be negative to keep us alive, right? This is how we evolved. This is how we survived. But once we know that our mind is wired, this is called the negativity bias. Once we know that our mind is always going to underestimate our opportunities, it's going to underestimate the good that's coming towards us, and it's going to overestimate the threats. Once we know that, we can get maybe a more clear idea of what's really happening. So just know your brain is wired to not be neutral or even positive. Your brain is wired to be negative. So I always say it takes more practices, it takes more effort, it takes more consciousness to even get to a space of neutrality, much less a place of positivity. So we just have to know, the wiring of our brain is towards what's wrong instead of what's right. The mind is also a great self-sabotager, convinces us of a lot of things. What I'm not actually going, and this last part, the mind is split. We're going to talk about, we have a subconscious and a conscious mind, but sort of part of our mind or how we think is based on our ego. And there's a lot of pop kind of culture things out there on ego. I love the ego. The ego is important. So anyone that says you got to slay your ego, you got to kill your ego, you got to be done with your ego, it's not true. Now, we don't want the ego to be in the driver's seat per se of our life, but ego is what helps us understand who we are. It helps us get out of bed and get things accomplished and move through our days and find jobs and, be of usefulness to society. Ego develops early on in our life. There comes a point at midlife where we want to actually quiet the ego. It's often getting too loud and getting in the way of us living our most authentic life. So again, this could be a whole hour conversation about ego, but know that ego is created out of what we're told about who we are. So we receive lots of messages, both implicit and explicit, from family, school, teachers, friends, culture about who we are. That becomes the basis of who we believe ourselves to be, which is ego, versus who we really are, which is authentic self. So when we're working with our mind, we are working with ego as well. And ego is the voice that will take us into more places of negativity. You're wrong. Why'd you do that? That was stupid. You're never going to get better at this. You're a loser. That's not your wise voice speaking to you. That's often the voice of the ego. So let's talk about how the mind is split. I think if you've ever taken Psych 101, you've probably seen an image similar to this, but I do want to just make a point of this because it's such a passion of mine. And I think it's so useful for us to know that our mind is really powerful and we really only just a small portion of our mind is above the surface. So it's often said that 95% of our mind is working at that subconscious level. And So much of our mind, we're not even aware, is making decisions, reacting to things, you know, moving through life based on subconscious mind versus, I say, about 5% is conscious. So this is why I firmly believe that our conscious mind, what's above the surface, will not change us. So we can, again, create all kinds of positive thinking. We can try to talk our way through things. We can try to talk our way out of things. But we have all these subconscious programs running that really direct our lives, which is why in this Tend Her, I decided to add in the section on hypnosis. And I did that because with hypnosis, we're tapping into the subconscious mind. We're rewiring. We're creating new programming in the subconscious mind, which then really can shift things. If 95% of how we move through the world is based on the wiring of our subconscious mind. I realize I have one more slide I want to show you about the subconscious mind. And this is my sweet daughter, Greta, when she was 6. She's 11 now, so she doesn't look like this anymore. But this is Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's a biologist and a well-known author, who's written many really powerful books. He's very much shaped a lot of my thinking about this. He writes that our thoughts are mainly controlled by our subconscious, so what's underneath the surface, which is largely formed before the age of 6. And you cannot change the subconscious mind by just thinking about it. That's why the power of positive thinking will not work for most people. It's not enough. The subconscious mind is like a tape player, and until you change the tape, it will not change. So again, this is what we're trying to do with the hypnosis. This is also, we shape our subconscious mind with meditation. We shape our subconscious mind with deep rest. There's many ways to begin to shift sort of these old tapes that are just playing in the background that we're not even aware of. So know that your mind is very powerful, and that we can, I believe, really make some changes in our lives by not just changing our thoughts, but changing our energy, changing sort of what's a little bit deeper. So what is going to get us to tapping into more of the wisdom, because there's a lot of wisdom under the surface in that subconscious mind? What really helps us tap into that? So if the mind, Betsy, is unreliable, if the mind is always working, if the mind is negative, if the mind tells me stories that I can't necessarily trust, what am I to do, right? Like, how do I function in this life if I can't really always trust the mind? So I'm not saying to discard the mind. I'm just saying there are other ways to process your life. There are other ways to make decisions. There are other ways to kind of figure out what's next for me. I'm at the fork in the road. Do I go left? Do I go right? Well, it's often said that the mind is a binary organ, meaning it's very logical. Of course, we have the left brain is the logic, the analytical, the, sort of taking action. The right side of the brain is the more intuitive, creative side of the brain. But it's often called, which I think is really true, it's called an organ that is, it gives you an answer, kind of yes, no. So when I have a problem, I can use my brain. I have a bright brain. I can use my brain to kind of make sense of it. And that can be useful, but not always, right? Because it's just relying on my logical, analytical, conscious part, which is above the surface. What about all that brain power that's under the surface? How do I tap into that? We tap into our wise mind. Who doesn't want to be tapped into their wise mind, right? Who doesn't want to live from their wise mind? How do we tap into the wise mind? Well, we can start to tap into our wise mind through our heart, right? So instead of trying to make decisions based just on what's going on up here, what if we also took into consideration what's going on right here? What if we started to tap into the great power of the heart? So I spend a lot of time like this with my hand over my heart. So anyone who knows me well, it's not always up there, but people will often see me put my hand on my heart. My kids all know this now. I'm like, Mom, what's going on? Your hand's on your heart. So I am in much deeper communication with my heart when I'm trying to figure something out than up here. In fact, the other day I was driving and my hand went to my heart. And my daughter, Greta, was in the driver's seat or in the passenger seat. And she looked at me, she goes, what are you thinking? What's going on? So they all know Mom's hand's on the heart. She's spinning something in there. So what I have come to figure out in my own life is that my heart is a far better guide. It's a far better source and much more reliable than up here. Because up here spins, up here is negative, up here doesn't always give me clarity. But when I ask a question to my heart, I get a response. And for me, with my hand on my heart, if I ask a question, my heart will often expand. It will feel like it grows when the answer is like, yes. Whereas if the sensation I get is one of constriction, like pulling away, tightening, that for me often feels like a no. Now, when I've taught this technique to other people have different sensations in their body for yes. For some people, it feels tingly, right? But usually there's a positive sensation associated with yes, and much more of a constricted, held in heat sort of sensation with no. So this is something you can play around with, but how I do it is, and I ask like ridiculous questions, like, should I eat that for lunch or that for lunch? Right? My heart will be like, that, right? Or my heart, is it in my highest interest to go to that concert on Tuesday night with my friend? Yes. Or no, right? So I trust that my wise mind, my heart, is going to give me more consistent, better guidance than what my head thinks. And it's not to say that there aren't times that I ask my heart something and my heart is like, yeah. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. Right. So we have free will. We can override what our heart tells us. But just taken from my experience working with my heart, my hand on my heart, literally for years now, my heart almost always consistently guides me to the best outcome for myself. Whereas my head sometimes does, but not as consistent as my heart. So this can sound totally woo-woo and out there. You'll be like, I don't know what she's talking about. This is crazy. But I actually think more of you totally get this, right? This is a heart head thing. Like sometimes our head is in wars with our heart. Our heart says, oh, I should go. I need to get out of this. And the head is like, that's ridiculous. You got to think about the money. You got to think about the insurance, right? Like this happens. I know, I can feel you, even though you're not here with me right in the moment, how you get this. So because I'm trained as a scientist, I'm always on the lookout for the research. Like, what does the research tell us? So I found some. I've known this research for a while, but I want to share it with you because it's powerful. So there's an amazing nonprofit in Northern California called the HeartMath Institute. There's the website at the bottom here. And they do research on the science of the heart. In fact, the heart coherent technique that I've been teaching you, breathing into the heart, finding gratitude in the heart, it comes from HeartMath. And they know that with this technique, this coherent technique, we are regulating, or we are making more coherent the pathway, the connection between our heart and our mind. But this HeartMath Institute has been kind of figuring out amazing things about our heart. And the first thing is that the heart is almost like its own brain. It's like it has its own brain. The heart thinks independently of the brain. So the heart can think, learn, remember, feel, sense things that the mind cannot. Right. So it's like it has its own separate processing going on. And there are way more messages that move from the heart to the mind than vice versa. So the heart is sensing, feeling the world around us, and it is sending information to the mind. In fact, they think 90% of the messages between the heart and the head come from the heart to the head versus the head to the heart. So our logical linear mind is sending far fewer messages to our heart, where our heart is sensing and feeling everything around us and sending guidance to the brain. The heart is also extremely intuitive. And there is a quote here from Neurocardiology, a book written by very smart people that say, in our rigorous experiments on intuition, we found that the heart responds first to unknown future events that the brain couldn't predict. The heart sent measurably different neurological signals to the brain in anticipation of that event. So what does this all mean? Your heart knows things before they actually happen. So the heart can actually predict, this is craziness, but the heart can predict something that's going to happen even before it does. So your heart is so, because the heart, the idea behind the power of our heart is that, and all the great wisdom traditions, by the way, have talked about the heart as like the center of the being. In Chinese medicine, they call the heart the emperor, right? Like the heart is where it's at. So your heart is sort of beyond space and time, meaning it's tapping into potential future events, which is why in these studies, the heart can predict an outcome far better than the brain can. I mean, this stuff totally blows my mind. The other thing about the heart is it is connected to a deep wisdom beyond us. What do we mean by this? And again, I have some science to back this up. When you are listening to your heart, living from your heart, asking messages to your heart, it's tapped into some deeper wisdom source. And you can call it whatever you want. You know, is it God? Is it the universe? Is it, like archetypal wisdom? What is it? Well, we just know the heart is able to connect to sources of wisdom that are beyond what we're carrying in our mind. And this comes from a journal called the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine. It's a peer-reviewed journal, hard to get published in. These researchers say there's compelling evidence to suggest that the physical heart is coupled to a field of information that is not bound by the classical limits of time and space. Meaning, when we are living from our heart, we are connected to sources of wisdom that are so much bigger, so much wiser, so much more knowing than we are, right? So may this all be motivation for us to live more, to spend more time with our hand on our heart, to really touch in. So this is why from class number 1, I taught you right away, heart coherent breathing. Again, this is big from the HeartMath Institute. I taught you the basics. I added a little bit. Traditional heart coherent breathing is just hand on the heart, breathe in and out of the heart, move into some gratitude. I felt like it was important to draw awareness up from the earth into the heart and from the sky. So we're sort of working more with the elements. We're bringing grounded, safe earth energy into the heart. We're bringing sort of more air, connection to higher realms into the heart. And then we're breathing in and out of the heart. And when you breathe like this, we know that you're creating this optimization for connection between your heart and your mind. And your heart is actually vibrating at something called 0.1 hertz, which is the same vibration that the entire planet vibrates at. So HeartMath Institute is also talking about is when we are in this coherent state, we're also optimizing our connection with the planet. So this is like big, big, big macro level stuff that sometimes it's hard to even wrap your head around. So maybe don't try to wrap your head around it, just feel into it for the truth of it. So what we're going to do, there's that 0.1 hertz. So when we do that heart coherent breathing, we start to get this coherence between. So the brain and the heart are vibrating at the same level, which is the same vibration of the planet. This is why we often feel deep peace. We feel deep relaxation. This is why also in a heart coherent state, we do have more access to intuition, to future events, to deep wisdom that's beyond us. It's amazing. So we are going to do some heart talk right now. We're going to experiment with this. We're going to find out, can I get truth, honest answers from my heart? Can I listen in to what my heart wants to tell me? Now, before we go into the exercise, the caveat here that I want you all to know is sometimes I do believe the heart is always honest with us, but sometimes, and I have had this in my own life, sometimes the heart tells us stuff we don't want to hear, right? I want to go do this. And the heart's like, nope, constriction, contraction, not a good idea, right? So just know that sometimes, and believe me, the heart sometimes surprises me when I tune into it. It's like, but I thought this makes more sense. Nope, do it this way, right? So sometimes you won't always like what you hear, but I really truly believe the heart is always going to speak truth to you, okay? So I'm going to do a brief exercise here to end our class tonight. We're going to start with that heart coherence exercise to get our 0.1 hertz going between our brain and our heart to move more into ease. And then we're going to ask questions to the heart. We want our questions to be brief and concise. And anytime you ask a question to your heart, you always want to start with my heart. Should I, blah, blah, blah. Is it in my highest interest too? But always starting with my heart. Why do we want to always start with my heart? No ambiguity. There might be other parts of your body that want to speak to you, whether it's your brain or your belly or your back. We want to talk to the heart. My heart asks the question. So I'm going to take you through this exercise right now. It's beautiful. And then I encourage all of you to experiment, play around with this. Start to put your hand on your heart, talk to it, listen to it, see what it has to speak to you about. All right, my friends, let's take a nice deep breath in. And as you exhale, just let your attention start to move in and see if you can pull some of your awareness down into that feet or pelvis. So we just first want to ground our energy. And then when we practice heart coherence, it's really helpful for us to feel sort of a visceral touch at our heart. So this might be just 2 fingers right at the heart space. You might place an entire hand over the heart. You might place both hands over the heart, hands in front of the heart, but just creating some touch. Sometimes I'll rub the heart or even tap on the heart a little bit if it feels slightly distant or feels a little numb. Just creating that nice touch right at the heart. You might even just already send a message to the heart. My heart, I'm here. And bringing my awareness in direct connection with you. Now we work with the heart coherent breathing. So when you're ready, on this next inhale, it's as if you're pulling earth energy up through your feet into the heart space. And as the exhale happens, it's almost as if you can feel your heart expand, grow more vibrant, more awake and alive. So again, as we inhale, this is breath number 2, pulling earth energy up through the feet, through the pelvis, through the belly, up into the heart. And as you exhale, that heart expands, grows more vibrant. One more of these earthy grounding breaths, pulling awareness and sensation up through the feet, from the earth, up the legs, through the pelvis, into the heart. Exhale, just land in the heart. Feel this bright, expansive heart opening. Now, on this next inhale, we'll pull in energy and awareness above the crown of the head, from the sky, down through the crown into the heart. So bringing heaven down into our hearts. And as you exhale, that heart expands. 2 more of these sky to heart connections, pulling in light, love, goodness down through your crown into your heart. As you exhale, let that heart expand. 1 more of these. Now for the next 3 breaths, we just stay into the heart. So we breathe into the heart. And as you exhale, just feeling that heart expand, soften, open. All right, so now that we are in much deeper resonance, coherence with our own heart, just notice what that feels like. It can also help to align with the energy or the emotion of gratitude. And just gratitude for something in your life, could be a person, an experience, great meal, a good cup of coffee. You just tune into gratitude. Gratitude is way up there in the vibrational scale of emotion. And so from this beautiful place of coherence and resonance, this deep connection to our heart, I'm going to pose 3 questions tonight. I'll say the question and you might just mentally repeat it to yourself, and then just wait and see. Again, the heart speaks in image, it speaks in feelings. Sometimes you'll hear a particular direct answer. It's very helpful to suspend any kind of judgment and just stay open and curious to whatever might come forth from your heart. Question number 1, my heart. What do I need to release or let go of to fully allow myself deeper resilience? To my heart, what do I need to release, let go of to experience more resilience, more well-being in my life? Is there anything I need to release? Is there anything I'm ready to let go of that will enhance my resilience, will enhance my overall well-being? Let's take it in. A couple more moments here, receiving anything that your heart might be willing to share. Question number 2, contemplation number 2. My heart. What do I need to bring into my life to awaken more health, more resilience? So now we're asking our hearts, my heart, what do I need to bring in? What practices, what experiences do I need to enhance my resilience and my well-being and my health? So what do I need? What do I need to bring in? And last question for your heart. My heart. What do you need me to know right now? My heart, is there anything you need me to know right now? Return to gratitude, this time extending gratitude towards the heart for any answers, guidance, images, feelings, experiences it just relayed to you. And if nothing came, still send appreciation and gratitude to your heart. Sometimes if we've had a deep disconnect from our heart for a very long time, we're in the process of rebuilding trust. And so sometimes it takes time for us to be able to hear, receive, listen to the heart. And you're ready to bring your full senses back. You can just rub your palms together, rub, 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 rub. And bring your palms to your eyes. Feel the heat from the rubbing of the hands, just sort of penetrate the eyes. And then when you're ready, you can blink your eyes open and then slowly release your hands down. So get your journal out right away. If there are any messages that came to you from your heart, really important to write them down immediately because they will be a distant memory if you don't take note of them in the moment. So if anything came to you, even if it's something very small, I encourage you to write it down because sometimes it makes sense down the road. It makes sense later on. All right, my beautiful friends. This was mental and emotional resiliency. So I encourage you to continue to experiment knowing thyself, feeling thyself this week, realizing emotions are going to come up. Can I let them flow through me? And maybe experimenting this week with that heart. Can I actually just place my hand on my heart more, touch into my heart more, and maybe experiment with asking questions and noticing answers that come, noticing, if it's a yes, no question, does my body expand with a yes? You can even do a test by, my name is Betsy, and see your name isn't Betsy. So you should probably, unless there's a couple Betsy's on here, the heart will be like, no. Like if I say, my name is Joanne, no, it's like, no, it's not. Right. So you can sort of get a test for what is yes and no for me. And then just experiment with this. Keep building on this. Your heart is such a beautiful heart and has so much guidance for you if you tap into it and use it. All right. Mwah. I hope you're all doing well. Despite me not being here this week, although I'm home in a couple days by the time you get this, please email and write in with questions. We didn't have Q&A for tonight. So if there are questions, please email them to betsy@heartlandyoga.com. And I will make sure we use extra time if we need extra time in our 4th class to complete all the questions we will. All right. Bye.